Welcome to Learning Through Technology, a K-12 EdTech podcast proudly presented by STS Education. I'm Alex Inman, founder of Educational Collaborators.
And I'm Bob Cerruti, founder of the EduTech Group. We're here to bring educators together, helping them unlock the full potential of learning through technology.
Tune in every other week as we connect with education leaders and dive deep into topics that matter to you, delivering actionable ideas straight to your school. Welcome to the show.
All right, Alex. It's one of those odd days where I get to talk first here. And I think that's because of our guest. And our guest, Amir Jones, is somebody who I worked with when he was a student in high school and has gone on to a career in music direction at a high school that we actually work with at EduTech. But boy, am I ready for that conversation today. I'm looking forward to talking to Amir because, I know you and I are both in technology. You might be aware there is this issue with CrowdStrike that has crippled the Microsoft world, it appears.
Yeah.
And 30 schools and their phones are ringing my company and our engineering team about this, and we don't really have anything to do with it. Our schools actually don't even use CrowdStrike, but how interconnected is the world? We find out when something like this happens.
No kidding. It's a global catastrophe. I'm so, I travel a fair amount for work. I'm so glad I'm not traveling today.
I know, like flights stopped. I can't even imagine the logistic disruptions where you can't find out where packages are or where medicine is, or can you get a prescription filled or whatever while they're getting this sorted out. And my understanding is that the only fix is updating individual servers by hand at the moment.
That's right. Because
data center engineers are literally in there updating their servers by hand.
Well, just a little age. It's sort of Y2K. I don't know if you remember having to update all of the individual machines for Y2K. Well, you started by mentioning Amir. I'm really excited about having Amir, not only because he's one of your former students and you've had a chance to sort of watch him in the local community, which is really awesome. But, I think a lot of times we don't think of technology when we think about music teachers. And at least from what we've kind of read before our chance to talk to him, he's done some pretty amazing things. So I am really looking forward to getting into this conversation with him. Thanks so much, Bob, for bringing into the show.
Yeah, let's get talking to Amir.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show today. We've got another great episode. TW today, we have Amir Jones, an instrumental music teacher for the high school at Painesville City Local Schools in Ohio. And a little extra special treat to this. Not only is Amir a spectacular guest who's going to give us a little bit more, but as you'll learn in the show, he actually knows Bob, and he still agreed to come on to the show. So, Amir, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me. So, as you mentioned before, I've known Bob for a number of years. So that was kind of I kind of started doing some tech projects with him when I was a high schooler, and from there, I was kind of always into music, and I was also into technology. So I'm glad I could find a career that allowed me to do both. I was going full in tech, and I kind of went the music route, but I ended up getting a job right in my hometown, down the street from the high school I went to, and Bob's world and I kind of just joined each other from the past. He ended up doing IT services for the district I'm at now, so it was nice to reconnect, and I'm really excited to be on this podcast. It's really, really neat to deal with IT directors or former IT directors for yourself who are really into the actual educational part, not just the tech aspect of the job. So really excited to share.
That's me, actually. Bob doesn't care about that part.
Okay.
He only does the yeah.
We worked together, and I knew you were into technology. You worked on summer projects, as we reminisced a bit about as a student. But tell us a bit about how you ended up in education. You were in technology, you were in music. I remember you being in the band and that sort of stuff. But tell us a little bit about that, how you decided on what you're going to do.
So it's kind of an interesting way I ended up here. So my original plan was going full tech route when I was initially going to college. And then I got a call from someone in Harvey. They were looking for someone just to fill in a spot for their pit for one of the musicals. So I thought, no, this could be kind of fun. So I thought it'd be a quick little one-time thing. So I played in there. Then that morphed into, well, we could also use a marching band director. That'll be neat. So I kind of stayed on and helped with that. And then the director I worked with, he moved. And then they brought in someone else. Then that next person resigned that next school year. So Then the next person came in and resigned the next school year. So then the principal at the time said like, hey, you're here, you're consistent. You should really consider doing this. So in the back of my head, I always wanted to do music and be a music teacher, but I also knew that that was a scarce job to get, one per high school. So I didn't think my odds were that great. So, but I pretty much got guaranteed and as I graduated college and did it. So I completely 180'd and went all in on music education and got hired full time since then.
Hey there, it's Sophia, executive producer for the show. I want to invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, where we dive deeper into the topics we discuss on the pod. You can sign up at stsed.com/podcast, stsed.com/podcast. We'll send some exclusive swag to everyone who joins.
That's awesome. That's really great. My son is going to be starting education school at Arizona State next year, and he would love to teach music, but he's actually kind of scared for that same reason about really one teacher per school. So will he be able to get it? So he's also going to get a chemistry degree and be a chemistry teacher, science teacher as well. But he's not giving up the music. So he's still going to get the music minor so that he can get try to get the certification. So, because if he had his choice, he would definitely choose to teach music.
Amir, I think I have a bit more I'd like to ask about that, because it's my recollection that Harvey's band program the marching band program was not that. I did not work with Harvey at that time. And so I only saw them at the football game and at the parade each year. But it was my recollection that the band was not what it is today. We'll say, right? It was a much smaller group. It didn't do a lot of events or whatever. It's a substantial group now, correct?
Correct. When I first started, there was about 35 kids in the program, including like our flag team and majorettes and whatever too. So we're now averaging between 150 to 175 each year, depending on enrollment.
I mean, that's amazing, right? That is stupendous. Alex and I have done interviews with leaders in esports, building leaders, district and private school leaders who are all looking for a way to have student engagement. And, now we've got Amir, who's obviously, my quick math, tells me that is, 6 or 7 times what he had when he inherited the program. And I think he puts himself like, and then they just gave me the job. But I know Amir. Amir showed up every day and connected with kids and embraced the program. And that's hard to do when it's a little program, right? To have that enthusiasm. So he won't say it, but I will. It's been a huge, huge turnaround for that program. And we all know what those students who are in a program, whether it's esports or the band or an art club or whatever, how much more they get out of school when they have something like that.
I think so. The program I came from was particularly large. So I guess that's just kind of the mindset I had when I came into that. I only really knew how to operate in that fashion. So I think part of it was, rather than operating, thinking about what we didn't have or how smart we were or what we couldn't do, I just didn't think about anything. And like, well, we didn't really travel, so we're going to Disney World now. We're taking trips every year. We're doing all the things all these bigger schools can do. We're going to recruit the exact same. I'm going to try to get you the best quality equipment I can. We're going to do all the fun stuff that you see all these kids doing that you don't get to do. And no matter how hard it was difficult, but we kind of made it work. And once I got that student buy-in and the community buy-in, then the recruitment became easier and easier every year. And now, I think at one of our elementary schools, we had all but 6 kids in the whole entire 5th grade join band. So they're really buying in now. They see the program moving like that.
That's awesome. So I actually said at the beginning that you're at the high school, but are you at all of the schools in the district, or are you just at the high school?
I'm just in the high school.
Okay. But the success of the high school program has sort of also, you're saying, filtered into the success and growth in the middle school programs as well?
Middle school and elementary. So yeah, the 3 of us work really well together, and we aggressively recruit in the elementary level to make sure when we bust every single 5th grader up one day in the fall of every year. And we let them try out instruments, hear the band play, perform for them, go around and try everything just to make sure they really get to experience it.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. All right. So, this is a learning through technology podcast, right? And I think that a lot of our audience don't naturally think of technology when they think of music teacher, right?
Right.
But it's kind of where you started. And though it's not necessarily the first thing that people think of, it's something that you've really kind of integrated into your program. Tell us a little bit about that.
So in terms of band, I think I was telling Sophia before, band's kind of like an analog kind of art. You don't really think like, how do you incorporate that into it? But in the way our program operates and the way we promote it and the way we review stuff, I have technology in like every shred of it. Not so much when I first started, but now I've had the access to the equipment. But for example, if we have an event, a fundraiser, a concert, whatever, my kids are designing artworks, they're doing promotions, they're doing commercials, they're learning about recording. They're recording the concert, they're learning about editing it post, or how to set up mics appropriately during it. They've used all sorts of equipment. I have professional sound system. They're learning proper miking techniques. So there's a lot of tech we use just to operate.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about sort of that journey. Like, how did you get that started, and did it sort of take on a life of its own, or did you feel like it was something that you had to kind of fight for?
It's I think back about that because I think I first started hearing it was 2007. So I don't know if it was the technology of the time was more or less accepted, or now I don't know how to describe it. I think it's easier now when you say we need this piece of tech to do this. Okay, that makes sense. But before it was more of a struggle to convince people that it worked that way. So it started with me bringing in my own equipment, or I'd borrow like this piece of equipment from my church, or my friend would let me use this to record, or this camera to. Then after a while, each year I'd say, hey, like Booster, can we buy one of these? Or then we kind of slowly build things. Or I was writing grants to get a computer powerful enough to run my editing software. But now it's just expected that you use that kind of thing. So it was rough to start with, but now that's just the expectation.
Nice.
So Amir, EduTech works with you at Painesville City or at Harvey High School. And so I've got to see the growth that you've had. And I know you have an outstanding, a very cool studio there, which I thought it was funny when you joined us from your home office there. I'm like, I know Amir has a studio at his disposal. So I know you don't just teach band. That studio, you're not fitting a marching band into that studio or any band. So tell us a bit about the other classes that are related to that, production or what you're using the studio for, and how they came about.
So I have a music technology class and I have a music production class. So when I first started here, they were looking for electives. So the only other music elective we had was just piano class, which is good for some, but not necessarily good for everyone. So we were trying to find something that could reach some other students that they might be interested in and would also help them get that arts credit they needed for graduation. So we tried a percussion class, but that just not having enough equipment for every single, and that equipment is very expensive. So not having enough for everyone, it didn't quite work. So I thought, well, this is something I'm really interested in. So let's try this music technology class. So I kind of just came up with the things I think they should know, and went from there. So I really like that class particularly because it's a really an easy sell to the kids. I can say like, hey, this is something you can actually use in the real world doing something. You can run a professional sound system here, or you can learn this about computers, or now you know how to operate lighting. And kids will tell me like, hey, I went to this event, this party, and their sound was all messed up, but now I know how to fix it. So I helped them out, or things like that. So in my music technology class, we learn a broad range of things. So it's from operating professional sound systems, from wiring up before we started the basic cable management, how to properly wrap a cable. They learn how to operate soundboards. They learn about speakers, amplification, and then we get into some networking because everything's gone so digital now. They've learned like AV over IP and all sorts of things. We even learn how to do some light tech support. We'll tear down and build some computers here and there at the very, very end of the project, but they learn how to build a studio build. So a lot of really useful skills I think serve them well outside the classroom.
Oh my God, that's so awesome.
Right, this is what I said. And I'm like, we got to talk to Amir.
I was sitting here with a huge grin. Oh my God, Amir, I wish I could take your class.
It's something Amir hasn't brought up is Painesville City Schools, I think it's fair to say, it's not an affluent school. It is not, it is much more reflective of an urban school than it is of a we've talked to people in suburban or affluent areas who are doing great things too, in independent schools that have different funding sources or availability of donors. This is all done with boosters and fundraising and general fund that you have to win over. Those dollars are competing for everything else. And Painesville City is not anybody's idea of an affluent school district with funds to disperse for these kind of things. I want to ask you this, Amir. We can, you said the school that you attended had a big program, and we can shout out Riverside Schools. They've had an outstanding band program for 20 years, the 20 years that I've known them. And it's a big program and a lot of involvement. And that's where I'm guessing, found a bit of love for marching band and led you to what you're doing now. But the two communities are very close together. Like I run into you at the parade, or They show up the city. What's it like to be a teacher in the area you grew up? You have teachers that you still run into that were your teachers, and you run into students. So what is that like?
At first it was kind of weird, going to the big rival school, but it's a weird rivalry. We're literally down the same street, like a mile apart. So, it's different, but it was weird at first. And I think I ran to our old superintendent at the first time we played in the football. I was like, "What are you doing?" But after everybody got used to it, it's actually been pretty nice. We don't really play in the football anymore because we're several divisions off, so that kind of made it even less of a deal now. But the proximity is very, very helpful. Like, so my band director he needs something, he'll shoot by and grab something. I'll go over there and grab something, or we'll collaborate on various things. So it's actually really nice to have that access and those resources so close.
Are you dealing with too many broken Chromebooks at your school? It can be tough to keep up. That's where the STS Education and FedEx Fixed Cost Chromebook Repair Program comes in. For $99, we take care of everything: shipping, parts, and labor. This means fewer headaches for you and more consistent learning for your students. To learn more, check out stsed.com/break-fix.
Yeah, that is, I had never thought of it, but yeah, it is. You could walk from Riverside to Harvey in less than an hour, and just straight down the road. Probably 35 minutes you can make the walk. You can do the drive in 4 or 5 minutes. It could be perhaps the closest rival high schools. They're very close. And that's nice to know that you have that ability to still work with your alma mater and to grow both programs together. I've always thought that it was cool they do the Memorial Day parade together. I feel like I've talked too much now. I feel like Alex and when we normally do these, but I really enjoy talking to Amir. So I'll take a break here and I'll sit back and I'll let Alex ask questions that I'm not thinking of, I'm sure.
No, that's a great question, because my mom is an educator, but we moved around a lot when I grew up. And so I never had the opportunity to work in the same community where I grew up, right? Or as a teacher. As a consultant, actually, I have had that opportunity, and that's pretty awesome and wonderful. So I'm glad, Bob, that you kind of came back to that. There was actually another thing that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to kind of loop back on, and that's on student engagement, right? And you grew your program from 35 to 135. That's a massive group. Do you attribute some of that to technology or just your recruiting? Do you think that the technology, the connection that the students have had to that, has had any impact on that growth and engagement?
I think we'd use the technology to enhance the program overall. So that's part of the package or the appeal. So everything we do, my kids know, everything that you touch or anything that goes out to the public or anything they see has to be up to a certain standard. And they'll make fun of me hey, that comma doesn't look right on that sheet or whatever. But they know in the end that you have to spend time making it look great. But I think that's part of the product that people see. So I've got kids involved in everything we do. And that's part of it too. I make sure they really take that ownership. So not a letter goes out, not a program happens, not an event happens without at least 10 kids in the background doing a majority of the work. I'm just kind of directing them around and making sure it comes out okay.
I like that for a few reasons. I mean, I think it's more natural. One is it's more fun, and it gives kids something different to do to sort of broaden their perspective on music as an industry, right? But it also, in sort of that same vein, it's so much more authentic, right? So my son, an indie rock band that he started, they're actually this is gonna actually air after this, but they'll be playing in downtown Colorado Springs on July 20th. So but the greatest weakness that they have right now, they all of them played in their high school bands or their programs or their churches or something like that, but they don't have the technical skills. And so they released this is Pillbug Fan Club, for those of you who are looking also for a great new band to listen to. My son's going to be thrilled that he got a plug in our podcast.
We're cutting all of this, Alex.
But when they started doing their own recordings, it's not easy, right? Doing a high quality recording it's hard work. It takes that understanding of the mics that you mentioned. It really takes an understanding of the software. Really takes an understanding of the acoustics of the room in addition to the mics and how that plays into the mics, right? There's a lot of technical skill that goes into it. And if you listen to Pillbug Fan Club, that's the second time I mentioned it, you will realize that they were not in your class. They did not have those skills. So it's important, and it has I just like the authenticity, of and the sort of authentic assessment that comes from music. The opportunity to, when you're done, you get to listen to it and you get to hear where you excelled and where there's room for growth.
I like that you mentioned the how hard it is to record well, or mic technique. So Bob had asked about the studio, so I'll pivot back to that if I can. So that was a grant that was presented to several school districts that we went for pretty aggressively to put in this recording studio from a group down in Florida who sponsors this. So we ended up getting that grant. So that used to be our music technology lab. So we just had a row of computers, kind of a typical kind of cold computer lab feel. So they ripped all that out, put in all the proper studio equipment, the right lighting. They put in a little lounge with furniture, a podcast room, which looks really, I wish I would have recorded there now at least for that. But
that's right. What? You got a podcast room?
It looked like a couch and like the right scenery, and they have a little roadcaster. So, but what I really like about that is we are using industry standard equipment, which is something I struggled with the music technology class before until we got all this. So working with that group, they got to ask, what do you want? I'm like, well, this is what professionals are using. So I want as close to that or equivalent to that as we can get. So the kids get to use that kind of equipment, the right kind of mics for the job, which makes it easier. But then in the right software, they can go back and we'll do a lot of editing and post, and they'll learn about takes and plugins and all sorts of things.
Yep. Oh, that's awesome.
It doesn't surprise me any of this, but Amir said something that I think is important, whether it's technology or music or whatever, is Amir's standards for his studio. I only want what the professionals are using because that's what our kids will use. But he also said when he was talking about letters to go out or communication, it had to be exactly right. Exacting standards. We hear lots of times that, kids won't do it because it's too hard. I think Amir is saying he's grown it because he's had high expectations, and kids take pride in doing something very, very well. I don't get to work with kids like you do, Amir. Tell us a bit about whether you think am I right or wrong? And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
That's very, very true. They do kind of excel on that. And you can find within any group, you find your particular core of kids who will buy into it the most. But like I think like 5 or 10 kids I can name, like this type of project, I know they will do it the exact right way. And they're the ones to lead other ones to do it the right way. And it's kind of cool to see that each group of kids that comes in, a new group of kids will kind of be the ones that take the lead on that. And I can kind of guide them through it. But you're exactly right. They know there's a certain standard that everything should be at, and they will absolutely meet that standard if you let them and guide them and they have the interest in it. And I think letting them take that ownership in the program, that's not really my program, it's their program and they know it. So I think take a little more responsibility when like, this is me who's putting this out here. This is me who did this.
I think you just hit the nail on the head, Amir. I think ownership is probably one of the biggest keys to get that exacting standard that Bob is talking about, right? Like the students will do what they need to for a teacher for the grade that they want or whatever sort of external thing that they need. But it's different when it's something that you have pride in for yourself, right? That you want to get done right. And production is a journey, right? Like nobody nails it out of the gates. It doesn't matter how perfect your equipment is. Like it's messy. And when you start, I studied broadcasting and film in college, and so got to play with all that stuff. And I remember what we were doing in our intro classes, production classes, and it was garbage. We had great stuff, but we had no skills. And it takes time to understand how to develop those skills around those tools. And that progression of growth is such a spectacularly obvious learning journey. I think it's a little harder to understand your growth journey with an essay than it is with something like production, where, we understand media because we live in a media-filled world. We get to see that, professionally all the time and get to compare our personal journey to that. It's such a transparent and obvious learning journey for the student, which I don't think that's the way they're thinking of it, but it is what they're living and growing and doing, It's great.
So Amir, your career in music started at what I would say is kind of the dawn of technology adoption in education. You were a high school student at the time, but you and I both got our starts in educational technology at the same time. You and I worked together, and then you went into this. How has the changing technology, whether you've pushed for the adoption or you've been reactive, like, oh, I saw this technology being used, How has that evolved over the, hard to believe, 15 years that you've been, or nearly 15 years that you've been doing this?
So I think adoption wise, it's almost like a necessary part of it is a necessary part of the operations for the schools now. Like you see, if our student management system goes down, the whole world ends pretty much. So it's definitely necessary. And I think that from when I first started, like you said, we were right on the cusp where it was neat to have, we're using this, but we weren't really all in like we are now. One thing student wise I've noticed is, interestingly enough, the tech skills of my students have gotten, I don't want to say worse, but different. My initial group was, they all knew how to use a computer. They all got around things very well. And then we kind of went to this Chromebook era where things got simpler and they were doing far less on computers, far less involved into really just using a browser, right? So their phone. So I got groups of kids who didn't really know how to do any of the other computer skills. So we had to kind of change focus in our technology classes to bring them into those, which really is kind of neat teaching them that, because like they're seeing that for the first time when it's something I thought we were all used to. So I think the tech has become such a natural part of our day-to-day operations with kids, but it's become simpler in ways. So at the level we're doing it, it's much deeper. So it's nice to take them to that next step.
So kind of speaking of next steps, I wanted to ask you a little bit about pixel perfect media and live streaming. So you've got a little side hustle, is that right?
This kind of came about during COVID. So everyone, like, live streaming pretty much exploded during COVID. So lots of people were like, hey, we need help doing this. We need help doing that. So one of my former students and I, let's just go in and figure this out. So I had a pretty good idea, but I definitely learned a lot as I went with it. But we put a lot of, especially in local churches, we put in a lot of live streaming equipment. So the right video equipment, the right audio equipment for them. And a big gig we did was for the Cleveland NAACP. We broadcasted not the current president of Michael, but the last debate there. So that was a pretty neat one. But we did some very live events like that as well. So at this point, I'm doing a lot of installs for helping people get into or upgrade equipment. But it's been a pretty cool little side gig where I've really just been learning a lot. That's been the best part of it.
That's great. And the fact that you're doing this with a former student and you're Bob's former student and on here, like this is all just too good. Too good for an education podcast.
All right, Amir. Now we've got a few questions that we ask everybody, or somewhat, we tweak them a little bit, but we ask everybody just thoughts off the top of your head. I can't think of anybody better to ask. What advice would you give to other music teachers in how to use technology or adopt, where to start? Are there specific steps or technologies that they should look at or resources?
Okay. So I think for newer teachers or aspiring teachers, the technology to learn, but most importantly, it's going to be professional audio, because a lot of the times, whether you know it or not, you're going to be the person that's leaned on for that in your building, because you have the closest proximity to it. So I think that's very important to know, because you're going to want to record your groups. You're going to want to play those videos back. And then really you need to kind of start learning video as well, and how to make that match and look good too, because that's become very, very important for our parents. We live stream every performance now because, not everyone can make it. People work and they still want to see their kids, or kids want to go back and see it. So people don't really have much patience for bad live streams. We've learned over time. So at least learn what goes into making that look and sound good. I would say, since I've started, there's become a wide variety of really increasingly free software you can be using. So like I switched from, the big one was Finale for us for notation for writing music. Now I've switched to MuseScore, which is free and you can use it anywhere. So there's pretty much free options for a lot of things you do. So I would say those two are the biggest tech skills to have, is definitely professional audio and your recording and streaming.
All right, you mentioned free stuff, but we also ask, like, if you had unlimited budget, what would you do with your students?
Oh, great. So actually, now that you said that, that's something I'm kind of working on. So in that production class, we use Pro Tools and Logic Pro, so two industry standard audio editing applications. But we have one computer in the studio. So I have 15 kids, like, all right, you come up and click on this, or you come up and try this, you come up and try this. So my next step for that would ideally be, we have a lab still from our music technology class, but I think Pro Tools is like $600 a seat or something, but somehow getting a site license or a bunch of seats so all my kids can do that at the exact same time. And I'd like for them to have little soundboards at each of their little little controller that each of their computers as well, so we can all do this stuff at the same time, because it's kind of an interesting shuffle. I had to have kids doing a bunch of projects at once just to get them through the computer. Like, okay, work on this while we show this person how to do this, or your turn to come edit this. So I think that would be the next step to make that class a little smoother or more easy for our kids.
Nice.
All right, Amir, we're at the last question that we ask everybody. And Alex and I have a little wager on this. So no pressure.
I've only mentioned the wager because I usually lose.
Yes, I think his streak is substantial at this point, but could be this is the time you win, Alex. Don't let me down, Amir. No, really, Amir, who was your favorite teacher who had a big influence on you and why?
Okay. So I would definitely say my two music teachers. Well, I'm going to say both because they both did. But the two band directors I had in high school, I think had the biggest influence on me. Whereas one, that's at Glenn Obergefell teacher choir there now, but he's the one who kind of got me into the musical aspect of it. And I think Dave Schwartz, my band teacher, got me into the nuts and bolts, but he's very touchy as well. So he got me into the nuts and bolts, the background, and the fine detail aspect of it. And that's who I really bounce ideas off of now to this day. So I learned a whole lot about how to operate a program in to a certain standard in a certain way that really still benefits me to this day.
Yeah, the wager is, Amir, that I think in if you've ever listened to our podcast before, you'll know that I was a less than stellar student, and Alex was probably at the front of the room with his hand raised, knew all the answers.
Yeah,
always. I remember Amir. So I have a theory that leads to education. You end up in the front of the class. You end up teaching the class when you're the guy at the front of the class or girl at the front of the class with your hand up. But I was not the greatest student, but I still had teachers who had a huge impact on me, and I believe that to be true. And I have no doubt the number of students that you have impacted as a teacher. And I even guess that Dave Schwartz would be and it's a great thing. This time I get to know them. I know Dave Schwartz. I know Glenn Obergefell, and they are professionals, and they connect with students, and they do a great job. And those standards that Amir holds his students to, Amir was held to in Dave's band. It was, and it still is to this day. So I'm really glad to hear that with Dave, and also really glad to hear that it was a no-brainer for you with Dave and Glenn, so that I win again. This is where Alex wraps it up and admits defeat.
Well, I lose again. Amir, thank you very much for joining our podcast today. What a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And it's just fun also as a parent to sort of project and think about, how my son's experience would have been different had he had the opportunity to be part of your incredible music program. So thanks so much for being on the show with us today.
All right. Thanks for having me.
I can't believe that you actually have people of that high caliber and quality who still want to connect with you. That's just great.
You clearly don't know the team at EduTech. Amir and actually our programs manager are from the same school and same time of being interns. I don't know where you get this. Just because nobody wants to talk to you, Alex, doesn't mean people don't want to talk to me.
No, I actually, they're all record examples, and I'm where it's coming from is me knowing you, but and doing these episodes. No, what do you? No, that was just a lot of fun. And what a joy it must be to have a guest who was one of our former students. What struck you the most from that episode?
Well, I don't know if it struck you the most, but I know it did strike you. We both lit up when he said it's their program. It's the students' program. It's not his program. And he has every right. In the world, we would see lots of people who take credit for building a program, as he should. I gave him credit to build a program from 35 to 150 or 170 is substantial. But he built it because he looks at it as our program, his and the students. And that's what struck me, and I saw that in your eyes too when he was talking.
Yeah, it was big. I think so. For me, it was that, but it was that sort of specifically with the ownership that they take over the actual production projects, right? And it's just the reason it resonated with me so much is because as a student of broadcasting and film in college, there's a lot to learn, and you learn it through practice and through doing. And, we had classes to teach us how to use that stuff, but that's not where the real learning happened. The real learning happened at late at night or after school when I would get into the labs and begin working on that stuff do my projects. And that's where I had that ownership, that commitment to excellence, because I wanted my project to look and sound good. And that sort of opportunity provides a different kind of motivation, and like you said, ownership to do the work that gives you that learning. And so that I thought was just a ton of fun. So
it's the last thing I would add to that is one additional thing. There are lots of things there with Amir, but for him to start this business with a former student, it kind of ties it all together. He was in the marching band with Dave Schwartz and Glenn Obergefell, and then he moves on to the Rival, builds his own program, and now he's starting this business with a student. And I'm sure there are other students who have been influenced by him who are education and music majors now or out and teaching. It's good to see that the good that these teachers have gone on. I'm sure Dave and Glenn have influenced lots of students beyond Amir, and Amir is doing that, and his student may be carrying that on.
A circle of life moment, indeed. So
Alex.
Thanks everyone for joining us on the show. We have a newsletter. We've actually kind of had one for a while, but we've actually not made it available to subscribe to. So we want to invite our listeners to subscribe to our newsletter. So go to stsed.com, stsed.com/podcast. And on there, you'll find an opportunity to subscribe for our newsletter. So please do that. Join us. And until next time, Bob, thanks so much.
Thanks, Alex.
Learning Through Technology, a K-12 EdTech podcast, is brought to you by STS Education, a Pacific OneSource company. To learn more about how educators can leverage technology to drive successful educational outcomes, check us out at www.stsed.com. Connect with us by searching for Learning Through Technology in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And click subscribe so you don't miss an episode. On behalf of the team at STS Education, thanks for joining us.